evil within too. Chapter 1. The room was dark as Sebastian Castellanos sat motionless in the battered armchair. The peeling floral wallpaper and dusty furnishings seemed frozen in time, much like their occupant. Sebastian stared blankly ahead, as he did most days now. 3 years had passed since the fire, but for Sebastian it may as well have been yesterday. He could still smell the acrid smoke, hear his daughter Lily's screams as the flames engulfed their home. His home. Now just a cold, empty shell much like himself. Sebastian slowly rotated the whiskey glass in his hand, the ice cubes clinking softly. He took a long swig, welcoming the familiar burn in his throat. The alcohol provided the only warmth he felt these days. It numbed his mind, blurring the edges of the yawning abyss inside him. The abyss that opened wide 3 years ago, swallowing all light and hope. Rising unsteadily, Sebastian shuffled to the kitchen in search of the bottle. His foot bumped against an empty one, sending it spinning across the worn floorboards. As he bent to pick it up, a knock sounded at the front door. Sebastian froze, bleary eyes narrowing. His hand slid instinctively under his worn sweater, fingers brushing the cold steel of the revolver tucked in his waistband. He wasn't expecting visitors. Not today. The rapping came again, more insistent this time. Sebastian crept silently to the door, peering through the peephole. His brows knitted together at the sight of 2 people standing outside. A man and a woman, both clad in business attire, as out of place in this ramshackle house as penguins in the desert. Sebastian hesitated, then slowly opened the door, the security chain still latched. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly, eyes flicking between the 2 strangers. His gravelly voice sounded hoarse from disuse. The man offered a polite smile that didn't reach his dark eyes. "Mr. Castellanos, we're here on behalf of the Mobius Corporation." Sebastian tensed at the name. He'd heard of them before. Some sort of research outfit involved in experimental tech. "Not interested," he grunted, moving to close the door. The woman quickly wedged her foot in the gap. "Please, Mr. Castellanos, we have some news about your daughter." Sebastian went very still, his breath catching in his throat. After a long pause, he unlatched the chain with trembling fingers and opened the door wider. The man and woman exchanged a glance before stepping inside. So began Sebastian Castellanos' reluctant journey back into the world of the living. The world where hope could exist again, fragile as a flickering candle flame. But hope could also burn, and there were those who lurked in the shadows eager to snuff it out. Chapter 2. Sebastian sat stiffly on the faded sofa, eyeing the 2 Mobius representatives perched opposite him on its threadbare edge. The woman, who had introduced herself as Tatiana Gutierrez, clutched a manila folder tightly in her lap. "Well," Sebastian growled when the silence had stretched on long enough. "You said you have news about Lily. What is it?" His heart thumped heavily behind his ribs. After 3 years of drowning in grief and whiskey, he hardly dared believe it was possible. But if there was even the slightest chance his daughter was still alive. The man, Damien Hale, cleared his throat. "Mr. Castellanos, what we are about to tell you will seem improbable at first, but I assure you every word is true." Sebastian's fingers dug into the sofa cushions. "Just tell me." "Very well," said Damien. "Your daughter Lily is alive, but she's trapped in an experimental world called STEM." Whatever Sebastian had expected them to say, it wasn't that. He stared at Damien blankly. trapped. What the hell is STEM? It's an acronym, Tatiana interjected, flipping open the folder. It stands for Simulated Telepathic Environment Module. In layman's terms, it's a virtual reality system that allows multiple human minds to be networked together. She handed Sebastian a glossy brochure emblazoned with the Mobius logo and the words, "The Future of Human Evolution." Behind the corporate jargon was a complex diagram of brains connected by strands of light. Sebastian shook his head slowly as he tried to comprehend it. So, you're saying Lily's mind is alive in some computer program? In simplified terms, yes, Tatiana said. STEM was designed as a new evolution of consciousness, but the core we created to control it has become corrupted. Corrupted how? Sebastian asked sharply. By a psychopath named Stefano Valentini, Damien said. He was our lead researcher on the sensory manipulation aspects of STEM, but he used his knowledge to hijack the system and reshape it into his own twisted world. Sebastian flipped through the brochure with growing unease. God, what had they created here? If Lily's trapped in there with this STEM psycho, fear coiled tight around Sebastian's heart. She's still alive, Tatiana stressed. But her mind is being subjected to horrific scenarios. We've lost too many test subjects this way. Sebastian surged to his feet, looming over them. Test subjects, he thundered. You put my daughter in that thing as some damned experiment. Please, Mr. Castellanos. Damien raised a placating hand. That's not the full story. Your daughter is special. She has a unique connection to STEM itself. That's why we need to get her out of there before Valentini exploits her gifts for his own ends. Sebastian's head swam as he tried to absorb it all. Gifts? Experiments? What the hell had Lily become involved in? And how was any of it even possible? He paced the cluttered living room, running a hand roughly through his hair. As a former police detective, his instinct was to be skeptical of such incredible claims. But he also recognized the anxiety in Damien's eyes and the hint of guilt in Tatiana's. Maybe, just maybe, they were telling the truth. Sebastian came to a halt, fixing the Mobius team with a piercing look. Tell me what I need to do to get my daughter back. Damien nodded. We can insert your consciousness directly into STEM, but extracting Lily safely will require discretion. Valentini cannot discover she's unique or that we sent you in. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He didn't like the idea of sneaking around this Valentini psycho. If Lily was in danger, he would take the most direct approach possible. But for now, he needed more information. Take me to this STEM place. I'll do whatever it takes to get Lily out of there. Tatiana rose, clutching her folder to her chest. We'll leave immediately, but I must warn you, the realities you will encounter inside STEM are deeply disturbing. She swallowed hard. Valentini is not a man bound by human decency or sanity. A muscle feathered in Sebastian's cheek. Good, he said coldly. Then I won't be there. Chapter 3. Sebastian shifted uncomfortably in the smooth leather seat as their sleek car sped down the highway. Unfamiliar sensations battled within him, anticipation, anxiety, and a fragile sprouting of hope. The passing blurred scenery outside seemed strangely unreal after so many years spent sealed in his house with only loss and ghosts for company. Now his daughter, his Lily, might still walk among the living. The thought sent an electric current through Sebastian's numbness. but doubt still whispered insidiously in the corners of his mind. This was madness, surely. Entering a virtual reality to pull someone's consciousness free. Like the plot of some hackneyed science fiction novel. If he didn't still feel the lingering ghost of his former logical, detective self, he would have written it all off as utter lunacy. Yet that small flame of hope refused to be extinguished. He had to know for sure, one way or another. Had to find Lily, or whatever version of her might exist inside this stem. Tatiana's voice drew him from his thoughts. "We're nearly there, Mr. Castellanos. The main Mobius research facility is just ahead." Sebastian frowned as the car turned down a long, unmarked road that cut through dense forest. After several miles, the trees fell away, revealing a sprawling multi-story complex done in sterile concrete and glass. The entire place had an air of secrecy, from the remote location to the keycard gates and patrolling guards. This Pandora's box that held his daughter. Inside, he was greeted by more pristine white halls and rooms housing inscrutable equipment. Scientists and technicians buzzed about performing arcane tasks, paying the newcomer no mind. Tatiana led Sebastian to a small exam room containing an imposing metal chair surrounded by monitors. "Here we will prepare you for insertion into STEM," she explained. "It's a direct feed into the core. Your physical body will remain safely here." Sebastian eyed the apparatus warily. It resembled an electric chair, though Tatiana assured him the outcome would be much different. As technicians strapped electrodes to his head and chest, Sebastian's doubts resurfaced. This still felt like madness. But the thought of Lily lost somewhere in that monstrous system steeled his resolve. He would walk through hell itself to save her if need be. Tatiana offered an encouraging smile that didn't reach her eyes. "See you on the other side, Mr. Castellanos, and good luck." Sebastian nodded tersely. He closed his eyes as the chair hummed to life, vibrating beneath him. There was a high-pitched whine and a burst of white behind his eyelids. Then, nothingness. When Sebastian opened his eyes, he found himself in a very different reality indeed. Chapter 4. Sebastian blinked, momentarily disoriented. His surroundings had changed utterly in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Gone were the sterile white walls and chrome equipment, replaced by, what was this place? He stood in a dimly lit hospital corridor stretching off in shadowy opulence. The peeling floral wallpaper and dust motes floating in beams of sunlight peering through broken boards on the windows seemed familiar, reminiscent of his own home somehow. But other details jarred, like the gurneys overturned in the hall amidst scattered medical instruments and deep gouges torn through the walls. Sebastian's shoes crunched on shards of broken glass as he moved cautiously down the hall, one hand hovering near his waistband. An old instinct. But he was unarmed here, wherever here was. A brass nameplate on one door read Brookhaven Hospital, but Sebastian had never heard of such a place. Unease skittered up his spine. This had to be part of STEM. Yet it felt eerily real, from the musty smell of decay in the air to the dust coating his fingertips when he touched the wall. Was this someone's memory given form? Or had that madness he'd fought so long now consumed him? A muffled crash in the distance made Sebastian whirl, nerves coiling tight. Soft, squelching sounds followed, growing closer. The hairs on Sebastian's neck rose as inhuman shapes began to emerge from around the far corner. Creatures like nothing he had seen outside nightmares shambled into view. Disfigured humanoid forms in tattered hospital gowns, flesh misshapen. Some had extra appendages, others gaping holes right through their midsections, innards trailing. Jagged barbs of bone protruded from warped limbs. Their movements seemed at once jerky and sinuous, spider-like. Revulsion gripped Sebastian as the creatures converged on him. These had to be products of the corrupted STEM environment. But they seemed no less deadly for their illusory nature. Jagged claws and teeth tore through muscle and flesh just the same. Sebastian backpedaled, eyes darting about for anything resembling a weapon. Finding none, he snatched up a discarded clipboard and hurled it at the nearest creature. The improvised projectile only briefly slowed the thing before it resumed its implacable advance. With no other options, Sebastian turned and sprinted down the hall. The creatures pursued, bare feet slapping wetly on the cracked linoleum. Up ahead, Sebastian spotted a door hanging half off its hinges. He hurtled through into what looked to be a ransacked exam room. After slamming and barring the door with a fallen cabinet, he frantically searched the debris. In a supply closet, he found salvation, an emergency fire axe. Sebastian hefted it, swinging experimentally. It would do some damage. But there were at least a half dozen of those creatures outside. He had to find a way out of this twisted hospital. The barricaded door began to buckle as inhuman figures threw themselves against it. Gripping the axe tighter, Sebastian steeled himself. He would carve a path out of this place, no matter who or what stood in his way. For Lily. Chapter 5. The blade sank deep into malformed flesh with a sickly wet thud. Black viscous fluid spurted forth as the creature collapsed, clawing feebly at the axe embedded in its skull. Sebastian wrenched the weapon free, panting. The hospital corridor was strewn with dismembered appendages and oozing corpses. These monsters clearly once were, or at least resembled, a people. Patients here, perhaps, warped by the corrupted STEM environment, as Tatiana had warned. They moved with a sort of pseudo-intelligence, a hive aggression. But they fell well enough when cleaved by an axe. Stepping over the carnage, Sebastian continued down the hall. The gory abattoir scarcely fazed him. He had seen similar as a homicide detective. Somehow this damned place had dredged up those memories, experiences. The echoes of his past lingered here just beneath the surface. A flash of white at the end of the corridor caught Sebastian's eye, a pristine door starkly out of place amidst the decay. As he approached, the door liquefied into quicksilver before reforming into a familiar oak door with frosted glass pane. Sebastian froze. He knew this door, this place. The KCPD homicide unit, his former workplace. What new strangeness was this? Some illusion or trick? He reached for the handle, half expecting his hand to pass through mist. But his fingers closed on pitted metal. The latch clicked as it always had, well oiled from habit. Swallowing hard, Sebastian stepped through. His breath left him in a rush. It was exactly as he remembered. The bullpen with its honeycomb desks and tired wooden chairs. The pegboard walls with maps and notes. The scuffed linoleum and perpetual aroma of old coffee. And at the nearest desk, a slim brunette woman flipping through a case file. "Joseph was looking for you earlier," she said without glancing up. "Wanted an update on the Aguirre murder." Sebastian opened and closed his mouth soundlessly. Detective Joseph Oda had been his partner for years before, well before. The woman was Juanita Flores, a junior detective. Both long gone from his life, phantoms from another time. Yet here they were again, seemingly flesh and blood. Juanita finally looked up, arching a brow. "You forget how to speak," I said Joseph wanted. "I heard you," Sebastian cut in hoarsely. He slowly lowered himself into the chair opposite her, as if sudden movements might shatter the illusion. "Why are you, how?" She tilted her head. "Rough weekend? You look like you've seen a ghost." Juanita studied him more closely, frowning. "Hey, you feeling okay?" Sebastian just shook his head wordlessly. This had to be Stem tapping into his memories somehow. But could they speak with the real Juanita and Joseph's voices' mannerisms? Recall cases and conversations long buried in his subconscious? Perhaps their minds were trapped in here too. The thought stirred an uneasy blend of hope and dismay. Juanita had started to look seriously concerned. "Maybe you should go home for the day," she suggested gently. "Get some rest. I can tell Joseph you weren't feeling well." Home. Sebastian nearly laughed aloud. He had no home to retreat to here. But he nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe I should, thanks, Juanita." Those familiar syllables felt odd after so long disused. "Take care of yourself." Her smile was fond, infused with old camaraderie. "Hey now, I should be telling you to go on, get out of here." She made little shooing motions. Sebastian managed a faint smile. Just for a moment, he could almost believe this was real. That the last harrowing years had been the true illusion. But the weight of reality lay heavy, impossible to ignore for long. With a sigh, he stood and made his way back to the morphing door. Glancing back, he committed Juanita's face to memory one last time before stepping through. The door closed softly behind him, cutting off that brief glimpse of the past. The faintest echoes still clung to him, though, voices from beyond the grave. They would linger in this place where reality held little meaning. An anchor, perhaps, when he needed to remember himself. For now, Sebastian could only move forward. Through the decaying halls, through deception and memory, toward the goal that kept him tethered, of finding Lily. Chapter 6. Sebastian crept through murky corridors, axe at the ready. He had encountered no further monstrosities since the hospital, but each shadow hid potential threat. An almost tangible atmosphere of menace hung here. This place resembled some sort of mansion or estate, all Baroque furnishings and elaborate oil paintings. But like the hospital, signs of decay and destruction marred the finery. Smears of blood, furniture smashed to splinters, curtains shredded and billowing. Sebastian's unease deepened. He needed to find Lily and get out of this damned place. Each step took him further from reality, deeper into the twisted labyrinth of Stem. Rounding a corner, Sebastian drew up short. A spindly figure stood at the end of the hall, regarding him silently. Sebastian raised the axe warily. More monster? Some new horror conjured up by Stem? But as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, recognition surfaced. The neatly tailored suit, thin angular features, and impassive stare all triggered memories. This was the Mobius psychologist assigned to Lily's case when she first vanished. What was his name? Hoffman, Sebastian rasped. What are you doing here? The figure smiled faintly. Just visiting old memories, much like you. Hoffman's voice remained perfectly modulated, no matter the circumstance. Something about his calm always grated on Sebastian. "Have you seen Lily? Is she here?" Sebastian demanded. Hoffman tilted his head. "I have not come across her directly in my explorations, but I hear things, now and then, whispers in dark corners." Sebastian's fingers tightened on the axe haft. "Enough riddles. What do you know?" "Patience, Mr. Castellanos. All will be illuminated soon enough." A door materialized behind Hoffman. He grasped the handle but paused, looking back at Sebastian. "Of course, not all revelations bring joy. Sometimes truths are unpleasant. The biggest lies make the prettiest packaging." With that cryptic remark, he vanished through the doorway, gone between one blink and the next. Sebastian hurried forward but found only solid wall where the door had been. Cursing, he slammed a fist into the plaster. "More damned mind games." Hoffman's words turned over and over in Sebastian's mind. He thought of Mobius' insistence that Lily was special, that Valentini must not discover her powers. They had seemed so eager to get Sebastian into STEM after her. At the time, he'd been too desperate for hope to question their motives. But now doubts needled him. What weren't they telling him about Lily? What was their true purpose here? Sebastian thought of the callous way they had dismissed the test subjects lost in STEM. Mobius had agendas beyond a simple rescue mission. That much was clear. For now, he had little choice but to keep moving forward. But he resolved to be more skeptical of whatever agenda Mobius was pursuing, and to hold them accountable should anything threaten him or Lily again. Hoffman's parting words lingered ominously. Sebastian could only brace himself for what other dark truths lay waiting within STEM's decaying depths. Chapter 7. Sebastian crept down a narrow stone passage, axe clutched in sweat-slick hands. After his encounter with Hoffman, the mansion's surroundings had shifted to something older and more sinister. Endless catacombs and crypts lined with dusty relics and strange esoteric symbols. Sebastian's unease heightened with each step. He was utterly alone and lost down here, cut off even from the illusory visages of his past. The shadows themselves seemed watchful, hungry. A skittering sound pricked his ears. Sebastian whirled, axe raised. A small shape detached itself from the darkness and limped into view. Sebastian's racing heart slowed a fraction as he recognized the German shepherd. Its fur was matted with blood and filth, one hind leg twisted at an odd angle. But the dog approached him without fear or aggression, tail wagging hesitantly. Wary but relieved to see something alive and natural, Sebastian crouched down and held out a hand. "Hey there, boy or girl, where did you come from?" The dog limped forward to nuzzle his fingers, licking away the crusted blood. Sebastian ran a comforting hand over its head, reminded poignantly of the shepherd he'd had as a boy. "You're in bad shape, but I bet you can still move better than me on 3 legs." He smiled faintly. "Want to be my guide down here? Help me find my daughter?" The dog whined and nibbled his hand as if in assent. Sebastian nodded and straightened. "All right then, let's..." "I wouldn't trust its loyalty." Sebastian whirled, axe raised. A few yards away stood a woman garbed in tactical gear, regarding him warily through mirrored lenses. He had seen her with Mobius before. What was her name? Kidman, he recalled after a moment. "Were you sent in after me?" "Not exactly." She removed the helmet, brushing back strands of blonde hair. "I've been undercover in Mobius for a while, but they kept me in the dark on recent STEM events. Sebastian frowned. Undercover, you a Fed or something? No, but we share some common enemies. I've seen Mobius' moral bankruptcy firsthand. Her mouth twisted bitterly. Unethical doesn't begin to describe it. Sebastian glanced down as the dog padded over to Kidman, nuzzling her boot. Can you trust someone who befriends their watchdog so quickly? She asked pointedly. Sebastian looked between them uneasily. She had a point. Is it dangerous? Potentially, the longer any entity resides in STEM, the more the environment alters them. I'd put a bullet in it now if I could. He watched the dog's innocent wagging tail, hesitating. But with a sigh, he hoisted the axe. Better safe than sorry. The dog barely had time to whimper before the axe blade cleaved its skull. Kidman nodded approvingly as it collapsed. We have the same goal, Castellanos, getting your daughter out. She extended a hand warily. Truce, for now. Sebastian gripped her hand firmly, meeting her piercing gaze. For now, I could use a trustworthy ally in this hellhole. She smiled bitterly. Oh, I'm not sure trustworthy applies to either of us anymore, but necessity makes strange bedfellows. Drawing her sidearm, she nodded down the passage. Let's keep moving quietly. Together they slipped into the shadows, two serpents drawn inexorably towards the buried secrets at the heart of this place. Towards truth, redemption, or destruction. Chapter 8. Kidman halted as the passage opened up into a vast chamber. Broken stone columns lined the edges, marking it as some sort of ceremonial site. Strange glyphs and reliefs adorned the walls, lit by guttering candles. The shadows danced madly about. This is new, she murmured. Be ready for anything. Sebastian tightened his grip on the axe. Together they crept into the open space, senses straining. The whispers of wind through stone carried no trace of life. Yet Sebastian's skin prickled with the certainty they were not alone here. Do you smell that? He asked quietly. Beneath the pervading musty odor was a sharper metallic tang. Kidman's eyes narrowed. Blood fresh. She drew her gun, clicking off the safety. They followed the scent until the candlelight illuminated a gruesome sight. A man lay sprawled on the stone, guts strewn about in glistening coils. Severed arms clutched a camera on a strap around his neck. Glassy eyes stared sightlessly up at some unseen horror. Sebastian crouched down, examining the ravaged remains. Something tore right into him, but this isn't like the wounds we've seen before. He's wearing a Mobius ID badge, Kidman noted grimly. One of their researchers looks like. Sebastian rifled through the man's pockets, finding a keycard and a crumpled note. Scrawled across it, in a frantic hand, was a single word, run. Straightening, Sebastian met Kidman's questioning gaze and held up the note. I've got a very bad feeling about this. We need to move now. A wet impact sounded behind him. They spun to see a quivering object stuck in the column, a fleshy pink projectile. It convulsed and distended until it burst, spewing out a spawn of glistening biomechanical creatures straight out of some demented womb. Run! Sebastian barked, backpedaling and swinging his axe at the first creature to leap at them. Kidman opened fire, dropping several mid-flight. But more crawled forth, skittering like frantic spiders. Together they bolted for a passage on the far side of the chamber. Sebastian felt claws rake his leg as the creatures pursued single-mindedly. Ahead, the passage split in two directions. "Split up," Sebastian shouted. "We'll lose them easier separately." Kidman gave a terse nod and darted right. With luck, they would find a way to circle back together. For now, survival was paramount. Sebastian plunged left into the dark. The creature's shrieks and scrabbling claws echoed close behind. His lungs burned as he sprinted blindly through the disorienting catacombs. Finally, the sounds faded. He slowed to a limp, wheezing. Claw marks stung his calves, but he seemed otherwise intact. Still mostly human, despite this place's efforts to twist him otherwise. Leaning against the damp stone, Sebastian fished out the researcher's keycard. It bore the name Theodore Wallace, clearance level 4. Whatever this man had been involved in, it bore further looking into. For now, Sebastian pocketed the card. All around echoed sounds of skittering, hunting, moving predators, ancient stone. This was a true catacomb now, a lair for things that should not be. And himself, intruder trespassing through. Onward he must go. Into darkness, madness, truth. For the sake of hope, flickering candlelight, drawing him inexorably on. Chapter 9. Sebastian crept along crumbling tunnels, axe poised to strike. The creatures had fallen back for now, but these catacombs still crawled with peril. He hoped Kidman had evaded them as well. Having an armed ally watching his back would prove useful. Rounding a corner, Sebastian drew up short. The tunnel widened here into a large chamber lined with metal doors, some sort of vault. Many had been rent open, contents smashed or scattered about. But some still stood intact, keycard slots blinking. Wary of a trap, Sebastian crossed the chamber to examine the accessible vaults. Most held inscrutable pieces of machinery and lab equipment. But in one corner he struck gold, a cache of firearms. With reverent hands, Sebastian field stripped and checked the weapons. Realizing they only existed here in digital form gave him pause. But the heft and workings seemed authentic enough. After loading each pistol, rifle, and shotgun, Sebastian tucked away as much ammunition as would fit in his pockets. The familiar weight offered some small comfort, although firearms had proven unreliable against Stem's monsters. Still, he would take any advantage he could get. Rifle loaded and raised, Sebastian left the vaults to explore the adjoining tunnels. His gut instincts as a detective told him he was on the cusp of something big. Whether answers or new nightmares lay ahead remained to be seen. Far off, echoing faintly down stone corridors, came a sound that raised the hairs on Sebastian's nape. A wet, organic pulsing, almost like a heartbeat magnified 1,000-fold. Somewhere in these depths, an abomination lived. With growing trepidation, Sebastian followed the sound down twisting tunnels and stairwells. He passed clean, hicked skeletons and strange occult symbols smeared on the walls in blood. Dread sank its claws in deeper with each step. Finally, a metal door emblazoned with the Mobius crest barred his path. The pulsing throb came from behind it, loud enough now to vibrate in Sebastian's bones. Whatever creation waited beyond, this seemed its lair. Shotgun held ready, Sebastian swiped Wallace's keycard in the slot. The reader chimed green and the door slid open. As darkness billowed out, Sebastian stepped through, knowing this was a threshold he would not soon recross. In the shadows ahead squirmed unknowable things, hungry and watching. There would be no turning back now. Chapter 10. Flashlight beam cleaving the shadows, Sebastian moved deeper into the creature's lair. The stench assaulted his senses first, thick clots of rot and viscera, mingled with some sickly sweet fragrance. Sebastian gagged, eyes watering as he probed the source. His light speared a mountain of glistening innards and limbs, heaped haphazardly about like an altar of offal. Flies swarmed the offering, laying eggs in moist crevices. As they were disturbed by the light, a quivering orifice within the monument convulsed and birthed a fresh swarm of spider-like creatures. Revulsion twisted Sebastian's gut, but he did not look away. This was the offspring, he understood now. The byproduct of some unholy symbiosis Mobius created here. Movement in Sebastian's periphery made him whirl, gun raised. But it was only Kidman emerging from the shadows. She too recoiled at the sight, pressing a forearm across her nose. "My God, it's breeding them," she choked. Sebastian nodded grimly. "Which means the big daddy can't be far. Keep sharp." They picked through the gore-strewn lair, weapons ready. The pulsating had slowed but remained steady from somewhere ahead. They found it 3 chambers deeper, a sprawling thing that dominated the cavern, clinging to walls and ceiling with distended limbs. Veins and organs glistened wetly in the flashlight beams, throbbing in obscene rhythms. It had no discernible head or face. But as they entered, fleshy orifices ear-eyed open across its bulk, oozing viscous fluid. A cracked, eerie cry echoed from the deepest crevices. Sebastian and Kidman opened fire, raking the abomination with lead. It convulsed and thrashed as bullets shredded chunks of wriggling meat. But already new appendages were splitting off from the central mass, squelching towards them. "We're just pissing it off," Sebastian growled, hurling a grenade into the largest cluster of limbs. "We need to find the core." Kidman eyed the undulating beast critically as she reloaded. "There, near the top, see that pulsing bulb." Sebastian followed her gaze. Sure enough, a large sac bulged atop the creature, pulsating rhythmically. All else seemed to stem from that focal point. With a nod to Kidman, Sebastian took aim and emptied his rifle clip into the sack. It ruptured wetly, deflating in a gush of ichor. The creature spasmed wildly, wailing in an almost human register of pain. "It's vulnerable, it don't stop," Kidman shouted, targeting the sagging sack with furious precision. They pressed the attack until finally the beast convulsed weakly and went still, its drone fading to silence. Almost mournfully, as though it had once been sentient itself. Sebastian approached the sagging remains warily, but found no further sign of life. Kidman prodded the ruptured sack with her gun barrel, lip curling. "Lily won't be safe with Mobius, not after this." Sebastian turned away, feeling suddenly weary. "No, she won't." He thought of the haunting cry as the creature died, almost human. So much exploitation and suffering here. Sebastian wanted no further part in it. From the darkness echoed skittering sounds of the young still slithering about. But for now, the heart had been stilled. It was time to move on. Toward truth. Toward Lily. Before the darkness swallowed everything. Chapter 11. Up through noisome tunnels Sebastian and Kidman climbed, leaving the creature's lair behind. Both walked with the heightened senses of prey escaping some unseen predator's territory by the thinnest margin. But the tunnels held no immediate threat, only lingering echoes of the unknown. After the claustrophobic warrens, emerging into a vast subterranean greenhouse came almost as a shock. Sebastian's flashlight roved over exotic plants and flowers blooming beneath simulated sunlight. The scent of rich loam and blossoms displaced the reek of carrion and fierce sweat. Kidman shook her head in wonder, trailing a hand over waxy leaves. Mobius must have been cultivating more than just monsters here. Sebastian made a sound of disgust. Most likely for their own benefit, not the greater good. Still, he could not resist plucking a tomato from its vine to taste. It popped ripe and real between his teeth. Here, some small beauty had persevered, even in the midst of such corruption. There was hope in that. Passing through the greenhouse brought them into a sprawling facility, all stainless steel and fluorescent lights. Gone were the mildewed stone tunnels. This was modern design. A bridge connected two high-rise towers, each bearing the Mobius Infinity logo. This must be their core research complex, Kidman mused. We're getting close now. Sebastian's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. Then let's keep moving carefully. We don't want to stumble into any more unpleasant surprises. They ascended the nearer tower via echoing emergency stairwells. Labs full of arcane machinery lined each floor, sometimes still occupied by slumped researchers. The deeper they delved into the complex, the more disturbed Sebastian grew. The grand scale of Mobius exploiting and experimenting with human minds became clear. How many had suffered and died to advance their agenda? On one floor, they came across surveillance footage still playing on rows of monitors. Sebastian's fists clenched as he watched subject after subject succumb to insanity or violence inside STEM. Some were lured in by deception, others by coercion or force. This is monstrous, Kidman said tightly. I knew Mobius was unethical, but this... She shook her head, mouth pressed in a grim line. Sebastian swore viciously, sweeping folders and equipment off a desk. They'll pay for this. We'll make sure of it. Kidman placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. We will, once Lily's safe. With a terse nod, Sebastian turned from the damning footage. His fury simmered below the surface. Mobius would answer for their sins. He would see to that. But the mission came first. They took an elevator up 30 more floors. When the doors slid open, they stepped out warily. Unlike the frantic energy below, this place was hushed and still. The polished chrome and glass stood pristine, almost temple-like. They were close now. Sebastian could feel it like static on his skin. The answers and Lily awaited somewhere ahead. Hands hovering near their weapons, Kidman and Sebastian moved down the silent corridor. Ready or not, this was the end game. All that remained was to step into the light and see if hope could endure here or perish as it had for so many others. Chapter 12. At the end of a long, sterile corridor stood an unmarked door. Kidman swiped Wallace's keycard and it slid open soundlessly. Within was a small octagonal chamber dominated by a raised metal chair, surrounded by screens and machinery, a STEM terminal. This is it, Kidman breathed. Lily has to be on the other side. Sebastian's heart hammered against his ribs. After everything he had endured, all the horrors witnessed, his daughter waited just beyond this threshold. Drawing a bracing breath, he stepped into the room. No monsters or tricks awaited, only the soft hum of technology. Sebastian's eyes were immediately drawn to the monitor displaying a girl's vital signs. His vision blurred with sudden tears. "Lily." "Get me in there," he choked out. Kidman was already prepping the equipment, frowning. "Something's not right. Her pulse is erratic, brainwaves going haywire." She looked up sharply. "We need to move fast." Sebastian was strapping himself into the seat before she finished speaking. As Kidman positioned the Neuralink apparatus, he met her gaze evenly. "Get her out safe, no matter what happens to me." Kidman pressed her lips together, then nodded. With a flick of a switch, Sebastian lurched into darkness. When he opened his eyes, he stood somewhere beyond comprehension. An endless fractal kaleidoscope of realities spun out in all directions, different planes intersecting at absurd angles. Squinting upward, Sebastian could just make out a distant point of light, the terminal room. But it was impossibly remote, the gulf between worlds absolute. Ahead, reality rippled. Lily stepped through the disturbance, regarding Sebastian sadly. "You shouldn't be here, Dad." Sebastian gasped, taking an abortive step toward his little girl. Though nearly a woman now, he would know her anywhere. "Lily, you're alive." His voice shook. "We need to go quickly. I don't know how long the connection will hold." But she shook her head, looking frightened. "I can't control it. Can't stop what's coming." "What's coming?" Dread constricted Sebastian's chest. "Talk to me, Lily. I'm here now." "The end," she whispered. "Or the beginning. It's all tangled together now, but it's going to be beautiful." She trailed off, seeming to listen to voices only she could hear. Then her expression firmed. "You should go. I have to finish it." Before Sebastian could react, she vanished between realities again. "No, Lily." He ran after her, through the shifting dimensional chaos. Strange beings flitted at the corner of his vision, the contours of madness. Finally, he burst onto a scene of even greater insanity. Lily floated in a swirling orb of energy, cables connecting her to a towering biomechanical monstrosity. The grotesque stem god creature seemed to be siphoning her power to breach dimensional barriers. Sebastian roared her name, but Lily did not react. Her power, once exploited by cruel design, had been turned to a purpose she now embraced. For good or ill, there was no stopping what came next. Squaring his shoulders, Sebastian stepped into the maelstrom. He had one last duty as a father, to stand witness. The final seconds stretched for eternity as Sebastian's eyes remained locked on Lily's. Reality splintered foul, unmade, remade. Then, white nothingness. And through it all, a steady beacon, her smile as she turned, reaching out a hand to guide him home. Chapter 13. Kidman shielded her eyes as an energy pulse erupted from the stem terminal, bathing the room in searing white light. Alert klaxons wailed, monitors shorting out with electrical pops. She rushed to examine Sebastian. His vitals seemed stable, but he showed no signs of waking. Meanwhile, the core systems were crashing. They needed to get out fast. Hoisting Sebastian's limp form awkwardly, Kidman stumbled out of the control room just as the hallway lights died. Emergency systems flickered to life, painting the stark white walls in bloody red hues. Klaxons still blared their discordant warning. Over the alarms came sounds Kidman dreaded even more as skittering claws and inhuman shrieks. The containment failures must have unleashed all manner of test subjects and creatures from their holding pens. She and Sebastian were in no state to fight their way out. Half dragging his dead weight, Kidman made it to a supply closet just as the first monstrosities rounded the far corner. She dumped Sebastian unceremoniously inside and squeezed in after, pulling the door shut behind them. In the cramped darkness, Kidman shook Sebastian urgently. "Danette, wake up! I can't carry you out alone." No response. The noises outside were growing louder, accompanied by frenzied hammering as creatures hurled themselves against doors up and down the corridor. Kidman's mind raced, evaluating options even as panic threatened to choke rational thought. Then she remembered the greenhouse below. It had emergency flood doors to seal it off from the rest of the facility. If she could get down there, they just might survive this. Taking a deep breath, Kidman hefted Sebastian over her shoulders in a fireman's carry. "You big lad, you damn well better wake up after this," she gritted out. The corridor had gone eerily silent. Steeling herself, Kidman nudged the door open with her foot. A lone mutant shuffled by, oblivious. Kidman slipped out and moved as quickly as she could while burdened, hoping to evade notice. Reaching the elevator was easy. The real challenge came as it descended into chaos. Kidman braced Sebastian's limp form against the corner, wielding her pistol left-handed. The doors rattled violently as clawed hands pried between them, then screeched open. Creatures poured in, trampling each other in frenzy. Kidman fired with ruthless precision until the last monster collapsed at her feet, the elevator drenched in viscera. She staggered out, gasping. The emergency lights still functioned in the greenhouse, casting the exotic foliage in hellish hues. Kidman just managed to drag Sebastian through the flood doors before they detected the intruders. As the thick barriers sealed closed, muffled pounding reverberated through the metal. But they were safe for now. Kidman sat slumped against the doors, Sebastian's head heavy in her lap. She brushed a stray hair from his brow with surprising tenderness. "We're through the worst of it, but I still need you to wake up." She shook his shoulder gently. "We made a promise, remember, to take Mobius down together." For a long moment, only the door's thudding replied. Then finally, miraculously, Sebastian's eyes flickered open. Relief broke across Kidman's face as she helped him stand. They were bruised and bloodied, but alive. And they had work yet to do. Chapter 14. Sebastian blinked slowly, trying to parse his surroundings. The crimson emergency lighting illuminated Kidman's drawn face hovering anxiously over him. Behind her, Flora writhed in exotic shapes, casting monstrous shadows against cold metal walls. "Are you with me, Sebastian?" Kidman asked urgently. "We're still in danger here." It came back in fractured pieces, the facility, the creatures, finding Lily. He struggled to form words. "Lily, did we?" Kidman's expression softened. "You didn't come out with her. What happened in there?" Sebastian passed a shaking hand over his face. The memories felt more like fever dreams upon waking. Endless realities, a titanic creature, Lily radiant with terrible purpose. Had it been real? Or just her parting gift to him, a mercy? "I'm not sure," he said hoarsely. "But she's gone beyond our reach now. We need to focus on escaping." Kidman searched his face, then nodded. "Right. There's service elevator access that can take us to the surface. We just have to deal with. She cocked her head at muffled snarls beyond the greenhouse doors. Despite everything, Sebastian huffed a weary laugh. Always something in our way. He cast his gaze around their makeshift sanctuary, seeking anything useful. His eyes alighted on a familiar shape beneath one of the tables. Sebastian knelt to retrieve his axe, inexplicably present, like some supernatural token, always returning to his hand. He hefted its weight, turning to Kidman with fiery purpose in his eyes. Then we cut our own path, no more walking in shadows. Kidman's answering grin was fierce. She pressed a shotgun into his hands, keeping the pistol for herself. No more shadows. Together they tore through the greenhouse and burst out into chaos. Half-formed abominations roamed the corridors amid flashing emergency lights. But Sebastian no longer felt fear in this place, only cold purpose. The axe rose and fell, Kidman firing with merciless precision at his side. They were death dealers together, carving a righteous path toward salvation. At long last, they stumbled out into open night air and racing rotor blades. A helicopter, emblazoned with the Mobius logo, sat waiting on a landing pad, pilot gesturing frantically. As they ran for it, the facility behind them burned, a funeral pyre for the horrors birthed within. Only once they were airborne, rising swiftly away, did Sebastian finally allow himself to feel anything at all. He stared back at the flames until Kidman touched his shoulder gently. We made it out, and we're not done fighting yet. Sebastian turned from the past spreading out below them like the ruins of a nightmare. Somewhere ahead lay hope, if they could shape it from the ashes together. He scrubbed a hand over his face and nodded tiredly. No, we're not done. The future waited, unwritten. Chapter 15. Soft dawn light filtered through motel curtains, rousing Sebastian gradually. For a blissful moment he forgot the horrors of STEM, the creatures and casualties, losing Lily again. Then full wakefulness descended, bleak and heavy. He stared up at the water-stained ceiling as he did every morning. The battle may be over, but no victory this. With a soft groan, Sebastian sat up, casting about for his clothes. The next steps lay ahead, however hollow their promise. Shutting down Mobius, exposing their sins. Kidman would be hammering out the details already, relentless in her crusade. Sebastian's thoughts turned to Lily as he shrugged on his rumpled shirt. Wherever she was now, lost to him, he prayed some small solace remain. His memories of that final encounter still felt more like delirium, fractured snatches of a dissolving dream. But she had seen, content, at peace with whatever grand design she fueled. He clung to that, tenuous though it was. Zipping his worn duffel bag, Sebastian stepped out into the motel parking lot. Kidman leaned against her sedan, sipping coffee as she reviewed a file. She glanced up as he approached, her alert gaze reminding him of their first tense alliance in STEM. Though brittle and sharp-edged as fractured glass, she had proven loyal partner through the flames. An ally to stand back to back with when shadows encroached. Morning. She extended a second steaming cup. Ready to raise some hell? Sebastian accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. After you. They climbed into the nondescript vehicle. No words needed, the destination clear. Each mile took them further from the death-tainted ruins, closer to where new purpose lay. The soldier's life, no rest for the weary. until finally they reached their destination. An idyllic country home surrounded by swaying trees. A place seemingly untouched by darkness. Kidman cut the engine, nodding Sebastian forward. "She's inside." With halting steps, he approached the porch where a slim blonde woman watched expectantly. As their eyes met, he saw past the superficial changes. "Lily," he choked. Her smile held that same trust and warmth from the faded days of her childhood. She stepped forward to embrace him fiercely. "Dad, you came back to me." He clung to her, still afraid this was some cruel illusion that would dissolve at a breath. But she felt solid, real. Sebastian finally stepped back to look at her properly, eyes drinking in each tiny change greedily. "Are you safe now, free of it?" He hesitated to even voice their trials aloud. Lily nodded, brushing a lock of hair behind her ears self-consciously. "I think so. Sometimes I still have odd dreams, but it's fading, like it happened to another person." Her expression clouded. Sebastian gripped her shoulders, heart aching at seeing her so burdened still. "Lily, maybe it's best to let it become just a dream. The past can't haunt you then." She searched his eyes, then leaned into his embrace again. "You're right, a fresh start for us." Staring past him, her brow furrowed slightly. "Will Agent Kidman be joining us? She's been very kind since I came back." Sebastian glanced over his shoulder to where Kidman stood some distance away, watching their reunion with polite distance. "No, I think she still has her own path to follow, but we owe her a great deal." Looking back at Lily, some of the perpetual weariness seemed to lift from Sebastian's soul. Here was something good wrested from the ashes and blood. A second chance, however improbable. Together, they turned and walked toward that rustic country home, leaving the lingering darkness behind. The future awaited, fresh and untainted. And within Sebastian, that small flame of hope burned on. The end.